two things are really at the heart of these agitations, the demonstrations and protests across the country. The price of food, that's just basic. But then behind that is the price of petrol, which of course has added to the price of food items because of transportation costs, has added to the price of, or the cost of doing business and other costs for Nigerians and businesses. So we've paid a lot of attention to food, farming, agriculture and the rest. But what about the petrol angle of this? It looks like the president is adamant with the removal of subsidy, saying that, well, it has come to stay. So how do we find our way around this, particularly with the announcement that crude will be sold in Naira to refineries in Nigeria? If that happens, will the price of petrol drop? That is a big question. So let's try to get answers to that as we're joined on the program this morning by the Publicity Secretary, Crude Oil Refiners Association of Nigeria, CORAN, Mr. Eche Stephen Idoko. Good morning, Mr. Idoko. You're welcome to the Morning Brief.
Yeah, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Nigerians right now are looking for some glimmer of hope. Yes, this government promised renewed hope, but Nigerians really want to see that in reality. So they're looking around. They looked to favor Philly at the Olympics, and they were excited, just something to cheer about. But today we're focusing on your sector. Fine, you're not in the Olympics, you're not running a race, but what you're doing matters to the lives of Nigerians. But before we get to the point where we ask, will this significantly change the price of petrol, particularly the announcement made by the government, let us know, as of today, is there any refinery that is churning out petrol, PMS, as at right now, today? Mr. Idoko.
Okay. Good morning once more. And let me use this opportunity to say congratulations to Ophili Favor. Even though she didn't win a medal, we're still proud of what she's been able to achieve. Nigerians are proud of her. Yeah, to your question, we don't have any refinery in Nigeria at the moment as we speak producing PMS. But we do have refineries that are on the way to setting up plants that can produce PMS. I know Aradale, which is one of our members and actually who prides itself as the first private refinery in Nigeria. Started with the 1,000, climbed to 5,000, and now they are doing 11,000. Those have installed capacity to produce PMS. And the reason why they haven't activated their plant is because of the whole uncertainty around the regime of supply, sales, and pricing of PMS.
Right. I just wanted to lay the cards on the table so we can then approach it from them, because even the modular refineries, the smaller ones, and we're not talking about Fire right now, we're talking about the ones that are established. There's nobody churning out PMS as of today, so it's still on the way. But let's try to picture what the future would look like. I know that...
Yeah, but Aradale is... Yeah.
Go ahead.
Let me add, Aradale is actually a modular refinery, by the way. So there are modular refineries with configurations to yes. And yeah, so I just wanted to put that out.
No, absolutely. But I just wanted to also lay it bare that there is none churning out petrol as of now. But we can at least look at what the future holds. And by future, I mean in the coming days, because August is meant to be a big month for Nigeria, both for Dangote and Port Harcourt refineries, and perhaps the modular refineries which you talk about. And of course, we can add the announcement by government that crude will now be sold to the local refineries. We'll talk about the implementation, the formula, and what you have seen so far. But I want to go ahead just so that Nigerians understand why this is important. Does this have a tendency to reduce the price of petrol? And in what percentage are you looking at? Again, Nigerians need hope, Mr. Idoko.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, the very moment that pronouncement was made by the Federal Executive Council, we did come out to say that this was a huge step in the right direction. It was part of the recommendations from the committee painstakingly put together by the federal government that brought together heads in the industry and different government agencies to look into the issue around ramping up local refining. So it was a welcome development for us, and we did say that this was going to definitely have a lot of impact in what the pricing is. But it will be it will be misleading for us to come out at this time and tell you, okay, oh, this is by what percentage the price would be affected when we begin to deal in dollars, because there are two sides to it. So if we begin to deal in Naira, because there are two sides to it. So are we, if we are going to do in Naira, are we going to still allow the regime of the dollars floating, or we are going to peg the price at a particular exchange rate in dollars and we sell in Naira? Now, when that is determined, then we'll be able to say exactly, okay, this is the landing cost for crude oil in Naira, because it's going to be an equivalent of the dollar in Naira. So, and then we'll be able to do our computations and tell you, okay, this is the percentage we'll be expecting to see the price drop. But in this current regime where the Naira is floating and left to float against the dollar in the open market, it would be a bit difficult for us to peg the price. But the sheer fact that it is going to be sold in Naira alone, it's going to give a lot of reprieve to the Naira against the dollar, and affect the value of the Naira in the money market. And to that extent, it will also affect what the end price eventually is for what we would be selling to the retailers.
All right, Mr. Idoko, let's put a few facts together so that for the purpose of our audience. So we know that Dangote Refinery's full capacity should be doing 650. Our other 4 refineries, 2 in Port Harcourt, 1 in Warri, 1 in Kaduna, should do between 455 to maybe 450. So cumulatively, we're talking about almost 1.1 million barrels. So you're a member of the Association of Refiners. The other ones, whether it's modular, or the names that is being called, what is, in your estimation, according to facts, what is their capacity?
Yes. Okay. So, well, in total capacity, if all the licensed refineries come on stream, we'll be able to do about 200 to 250 barrels per day for those that have been licensed and have been and are at various stage of construction right now. If they are completed, we'll be able to add another 250, between 200 to 250 barrels per day to the production.
So now we're talking about, by that calculation, I can do just hazard it around 1.3 or so million barrels per day if every body comes on stream. But speak to us about this directive by the president. We're still hearing stories here and there, but you are the ones that are the players. So whether it's becoming effective or it's been implemented, or the timeline or the basic housekeeping has not been done for it to start implementation based on the law, PIA. The president directed that Dangote refineries and other refineries should be sold crude in Naira. How far has that come? Has it been implemented? Are you guys seeing crude to buy? I wanted you to speak to that entire spectrum.
Okay, yeah, we have mentioned where we are at on several forums, especially here. So as it stands right now, none of our members that I know have started uplifting crude in Naira. Of course, we did mention after the pronouncement that the pronouncement was welcoming, but there was still few steps that had to be taken for it to become implementable. It was just a Federal Executive Council's pronouncement. There need to be a regulatory framework that would enable us access crude in Naira, and there has to be a guideline as to how we can access. We have to know exactly what quantity it's coming to us in Naira and all that. All those details are yet to be worked out. Well, it was a recent pronouncement, so we'll give the government the benefit of the doubt. We are hoping that in the coming days they would be sitting down with us as stakeholders, because you can't shave a man's head in his absence. we are hoping that our members should be part and parcel of the processes. But what I can tell you is that in terms of crude availability, in line with the PIA, the NUPRC, of course, working with the NMDPRA, had gone ahead to put in place the guideline, the Domestic Crude Supply Obligations Guideline. And what we are waiting for is for that guideline to be gazetted. We extensively debated this, or participated fully with other stakeholders, including the independents, the OPTS, and then of course ourselves, and Dangote. So we had discussed that extensively. We have a document that we think mirrors the mind of all of the stakeholders to an extent. But where that is now, whether it has been gazetted, is what we do not know. I'm sure NUPRC would be in the best position to respond to that. But if that document, the Crude Domestic Supply Guideline, comes on stream, it would aid those of our refineries that are producing now to at least begin to access crude under the regime that is ongoing now in terms of the incentives that are supposed to come to us. But as it stands right now, none of our members are accessing crude yet under this regime, and we are actually asking the government to expedite this action so that people can begin to reap the benefits of having refineries operating in country.
All right, Mr. Idoko, so help us out here on what you mean by the guidelines, because the PIA, beyond the PIA, so I know that Section 109, subsection 4, subsection 3 has to do with the relationship between the NUPRC and the NMDPRA as to make sure that there's supply of crude, and so the estimation as to what you guys need. Then Section 4 says it must be licensed and operational. Then it has to be at international market price, and then whether you can buy in dollar or naira. So what are these details that has to be fine-tuned before this is done? Because this is a critical sector, and I would expect that some level of urgency is required given what we're facing. People are out on the streets in Nigeria because of PMS prices.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, the NUPRC and the NMDPRA, under the provisions of the PIA, are mandated to develop guidelines under which these provisions would be implemented. So they kind of like flesh up what we would think is a skeletal framework provided by the PIA. So what you have going on, the details that you have, and I can't, it will take a lot of time if I have to go details by details on what the provisions of the DCSO guidelines are, but they're supposed to talk about the pricing, pricing negotiation, interrelationships, the processes for applying and obtaining crude oil from the marketers. So basically, it's a whole gamut of document. It's a document that guides the interrelationship between the both parties. Starts from a willing seller, willing buyer situation, and then on to curtailment and what you have. So the DCSO provides the details on how all this has to happen. So that's just with the guideline.
Okay, so let's break this down further. It's important to manage expectations and just have a picture of what the future holds so we're prepared for it. The presidency had said that FEC, that's the Federal Executive Council, approved that the 450,000 barrels meant for domestic consumption will be offered in Naira, and the exchange rate will be fixed for the duration of this transaction. So perhaps that handles the concerns you have about whether or not it will be fixed and at what rate will the Forex be fixed for that period. But I want us to go back to the 450,000 barrels figure. If we need 1.3 million in total for refining capacity in Nigeria, and what we're getting is 450,000 from the NNPCL, that's about 30% of what we need. So clearly, the other 60% or thereabouts, or 60 plus percent, would be gotten from outside. And again, it goes back to the question I asked. will that significantly change the price of petrol if we're only getting 30% of our refined capacity in Naira and the other, which is more, will be gotten in dollars?
Okay, that's not that. Your position is not exactly accurate. So what the president has said was that there used to be a 450,000 barrels that was designated for the government-owned refineries that are currently not functioning. That those quantity would be immediately as an immediate response to the situation be given to private refineries. But beyond that, we do know that there are other sources of crude in the country. We marvel at the narrative that there's no crude oil enough to service refineries in Nigeria, and I don't think this is actually correct. You do remember that there was a time, even before now, that you had, first of all, it was a crude swap, and then you had a DCSO, the DSDP arrangement where about 2 million barrels were given to people in a swap deal where they go refine and then they bring in products in. What happens to that? The DSDP, at least at the face of the law, has been abolished. That quantity can also be channeled to private refineries, to the indigenous refineries here in the country. And then the IOCs and the independents, the producers, have never at a point said that they would not sell to us. What they have always insisted on is that, okay, if they want to do business with us, the templates have to be right, the frameworks have to be right. We had never, because the regime of private refineries in Nigeria is quite new, quite green, there was no framework for dealing with private refineries in Nigeria before now. And at the time when we applied for feedstock for our refineries, which was a major condition to getting financing to build your refineries, there was a question as to where do we get the crude from? Would it come from the government's own equity, or would it come from those of the JV partners? And there was no answer. There was no framework to address this. This was where we had the logjam. But with the passage of the PIA, it made it abundantly clear that, look, it does not matter what part of the equity you are getting from. If you are producing in Nigeria, if you have a license to an acreage in Nigeria, you have an obligation first to a Nigerian refinery before you can export.
While I appreciate that, I mean, you play in the sector, I'm going to reiterate the statement that was put out by the presidency, and you can fact check this anywhere, that the Federal Executive Council has approved that the 450,000 barrels meant for domestic consumption be offered in Naira. While you may have expectations as to what should be, yes, there should be that. Of course, you should be the first priority. I mean, local refiners when it comes to crude, which we own here in Nigeria. But this is what we have to work with now. I understand that you might want to push the envelope to ensure that all of the other available crude is offered to local refineries in Naira first before you then take it out. But say charity begins at home, right? But this is what we have to work with right now. Perhaps in the coming days you can fine-tune those other areas, which is why it's important to have this conversation so we know what to expect. But when you talk about the landing cost of petrol, or rather crude oil, or petrol, I don't know which one you were talking about. Some will say, why are we talking landing cost again? I mean, there is no transportation issue. It is not going over the sea and coming back and all of that. It is not a DSDP, direct deal sale, direct purchase. It's not crude swap. It is crude that is mined here and is just taken next door to a refinery. So where does landing cost come in here again, Mr. Idoko?
So when we talk about landing to cost used here is just semantics. It's more or less like all cost inclusive. And even if you are producing it in country here, there's a bit of transportation. Either you are taking it by pipeline, in some instances you actually even have to barge it, or you're taking it by truck, because some of our members truck their refinery, their crude to the various refineries. So all those costs to be built into whatever is the final cost of this feedstock. So that's why when we refer to it, we refer it at the cost at which it is landing in your refining facility. So at that point, that's the cost at which it landed. Because all those costs has to be borne by somebody. Those costs has to be factored into your cost of production. So that's what it means. And then to what you have highlighted, yes, we understand that for now, what we are certain about is that the 450,000 barrels is what the president had spoken to, and that would satisfy the immediate need of the refineries that are producing at the capacity at which they are producing right now. But it's, like I said, it's just only it's an intervention. It's not sustainable. Because when even the refineries that are producing now have capacities of even expansion. So when the other refineries at various stages of completion comes off mainstream, there will be a need to also increase whatsoever is the quantity that would be given to local refineries. And that was why I referred to the fact that there are other sources from which the federal government can guarantee crude to refineries, and that's why I mentioned that quantity.
So if I get you correctly, what you're saying, in essence, is there's no need for Nigeria to export crude anymore. We have enough refining capacity in-house, at least to refine 1.3 million. Let's first focus on the local refineries before we take it out. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that Nigeria should prioritize the functional refineries in Nigeria first. What we have producing right now, the refineries that are running are not producing, they are not refining up to 1 million barrels. What they are producing is less than 1 million barrels. So I'm saying that for those refineries that are currently functioning, that the Nigerian government should prioritize satisfying their needs. And then they can still export the quantities that they need to export. And as a matter of fact, the NUPRC has a mandate to ensure that there is increase in the production of crude. So you're not saying in essence that because we are going to be consuming 1 million, that the government the government should rest on its responsibility of ramping up production. I know that a lot has been going into farming out more acreages to be able to improve whatever is the quantity that we're producing. At the moment, we're not even meeting OPEC quota. So the NUPRC and whosoever is concerned should also work on increasing whatever quantity they have to be able to satisfy export and also satisfy the home demand. What we are simply saying is that in all this, in whatsoever you are doing, the people back home should be considered first. And you should know that refineries in Nigeria do have their...
My apologies. As we begin to wind down, I want you to speak to the issue of energy security, which you have spoken about, breaking down a few things, but in a compound form, energy security and being the next exporter of petroleum product, which is the aspiration. Mele Kyari, the GMD of the NNPC, has failed on a couple of timelines, so it's almost safe not to believe him until we see it happen, because his engagement with the House of National Assembly even had to say, I'm not lying, because we've heard this, it will come up, we'll keep shifting dates and all of that. Now he's saying August, this month, we're supposed to start refining from Port Harcourt. He's saying by December, we're supposed to be net exporters of petroleum product, not just selling crude. Should we really believe or just be cautiously optimistic, given the fact that we've been disappointed time and again? He had said that in 2019, July, when he came and took over from Mike Barrow, he said within the lifetime of the administration, the refineries will be up and running. Until now, it's not up and running. So where should Nigerians be managing our expectation? Because we've been disappointed too many times. It's not about being pessimistic. It's about failure of the people who are making promises to meet their promises. You are the experts. What do you see?
Yeah, so like To be candid, it's a very, very interesting time for people in the energy space, especially for those of us from developing countries, with the whole campaign on cutting down on development of hydrocarbon all around the world. But then I remember something Aliko Dangote had said in one of his interviews, and it has been our punchline basically, that we have to begin to look inwards. And then the NNPC should also begin to look at collaborations more than saying, okay, we want to take this a whole haul. There are a lot of opportunities also while this is happening that we can leverage on. For instance, the African Energy Bank has just been established, and fortunately for Nigeria, we are going to be hosting the Secretariat. What are the opportunities that we can leverage on from the African Energy Bank? I know that at a point, the Afro-Exim Bank had also mentioned that they have interest in investing certain amounts of money in the development of refineries in Nigeria, of course, thanks to the success they had seen with the Dangote refinery. Right. We should begin to look at these opportunities than in terms of seeing what we can do to leverage these opportunities. There's also in the document that was I mentioned in one of my interviews here that was submitted, but to this government, there was also a recommendation that a hydrocarbon refining development fund should be set up by the government to be able to support the development of refining in country. We can't be running cap in hand to countries outside our shores. We can't be running cap in hand outside our shores looking for finance. We have to innovate and look for ways of trying to bring funds to develop refineries in Nigeria.
You know, while we're talking about this and we have something to at least look forward to, it's still mind-boggling that for decades, Nigeria has been mining crude oil, taking it all the way out of a country to be refined. And we were doing a DSDP crude swap arrangement, and we had refineries languishing in our country. It's mind-boggling. It is sad. And no one has been brought to justice for that. But we'd like to thank you so much. I'll be speaking with the Publicity Secretary of Crude Oil Refiners Association of Nigeria, Mr. Eche Stephen Idoko. Thank you for your time. And of course, I'll be speaking with you in the coming days to see how things play out in your sector.
All right. Thank you very much.
Well, we'll take a moment now. When we return, we'll bring you another side to the national conversation. This is all hands on deck, so this is something that concerns you as well. Stay with us right here on Morning Brief.